Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Sun Up on 7. Thank you so much for staying with us. I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with the Prime Minister as he gave us a synopsis of what happened during his travels, the outcomes of his meetings, and of course, discussing some very important national issues. Let me remind you that if you miss any of our segments, you can go to our YouTube channel. I invite you to subscribe and, of course, stay tuned with everything that you miss here on our show. It's time for our second conversation, and Lady Kathy Esquivel joins us to talk about her book, Bengi, which is full with so much things from Belizean culture to romance to mystery to murder. Wow, it's a full book, and if you've read it, come with me. Let's enjoy this conversation. But if you haven't, I hope that this motivates you to go and grab yourself a copy. Lady Kathy, how are you doing this morning? Thank you
Pretty
so much
good.
for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that we're matching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Such a
we
peaceful
didn't
color.
even coordinate.
Yes, we are. We have
I
the
didn't get the
white
vibe. But
and the
anyway.
mint. Yes, we love it.
So we're gonna go into. I don't want to give too much details into the book, but I do want us to talk about the storyline so people can understand. Because you need to go out and get the book. And Lady Kathy, before we even get into the conversation, please tell us exactly where the book is available so people know exactly where to go. I saw you put that plug in with the Prime Minister. Love it for you. So could you give us that plug again?
Okay, well, it's actually published by Kubola. And so they are responsible for having it marketing. So it's available at all the bookstores, like Brody's on both Brody's and Belmopan Brody's, Angela's, Dacre's.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all the bookstores, but because it's published by Kubola, they're responsible. I have some copies that I can also sell. Like
Okay.
I buy some copies and resell them.
Resell
So if
them.
you want it signed, I can do
that's an
that.
option.
And
That's
it's
a good
also on Amazon. So if you read with a Kindle, you can purchase it on Amazon. Bengi.
There's many ways how you can get yourself
Many,
a
many
copy.
ways.
I know
Beautiful.
when I was in Brody's, I saw it. I was like, Benji's here.
Yeah, I got it. I loved Benji. You know, when I was reading it, at the beginning I was trying to figure how everything ties in, but you did an amazing job at just tying
Thank
the
you.
story overall.
Well,
yeah,
I actually, after Kubola said they would publish, I actually contacted a professional editor in the Caribbean. And she did a great job because there's always, especially if you're opinionated, you always want to put in more than you need to because you know it and you want it to go in. So the professional editor, Miss Hillhouse, she did an excellent, plus she picked up a few things, you know, you said this here and that there. So I think getting a professional editor really makes a difference. It makes it more concise, tighter. You don't go off on little side roads. So that I thought was very useful. Yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely.
So let's talk a little bit about, going and diving into this book.
Yeah. Sure.
Because like Kevin said, it has a lot of Belize and essence. Like you could picture Belize.
right. I
just by the
was
little-
walking to like the shop, the Chinese
Yes,
shop.
and when you said the whole Chinese shop, I was like,
I can see myself
I
there.
love this. Like I am connecting. And so even just like the idea of, most Chinese shops, and I'm sure people can be able to relate to this, is how they have that barrier because of protection, but it also disconnects you. So can you talk a little bit about the different observations putting into this book to make sure it's Belizean?
Well, you just go out and look. I mean, I think it's told from experience. I didn't read it somewhere.
And
It's
so you just
how
try to
we
apply
live.
it in.
Yeah. And the characters, none of the characters are actual real people, but they're all based on real people. Like, it might be bits of one person and bits of another person. So everybody is someone that you could relate to because they're real people. And the places are real places. So,
And then you kind of put your opinion in it too as well. So
well, I told you I'm opinionated.
And I'll go back to that same example about, the Chinese store with the barriers. And so going deeper into it, people just see the barriers as, it's just because, they don't want to get robbed. There is a form of protection. But you went deeper and thinking about how it kind of also disconnects you from being a part of the Belizean culture, which is
Yeah.
something I do think, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are many Belizeans that don't really associate the Asian population directly connected to Belize. They just, put them as, people that are shop owners and so forth. So there is a deep essence in that too. So
It goes two ways, in that there's a language barrier
Yes.
as well. But also, when you have a fairly big subpopulation anywhere, they tend to be with each other because they have so much in common, they understand. I mean, if you go to somewhere with a lot of expats, British American expats, if you go to Placencia, if you go to Corozal, they all hang out together.
yeah.
And the Chinese and the Indians so there's a natural tendency to hang out with people that speak your language, that know. So the disconnect is in both directions, and it usually takes quite a few generations before that starts to change. So when I was teaching, I taught quite a few ethnic Chinese students. And very often they were the interpreters for their parents.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they made Belizean friends because they were in school with
Yes.
Belizeans. So I think it's not something special to the Chinese community. I think it's in general when you have a subgroup.
Yeah.
And there's enough of them. Now, if there's only a few, they have to mix. But if there's enough of them,
Where they can have their own community.
yeah.
That is
But
so
after a few generations, it does begin
do
to break.
see-
Right. I see them like speaking Creole now, speaking their
Better than
Spanish,
some
so
other
we can
people.
see how
Yeah.
they're connecting.
Even the Mennonites, I mean, it's another group that is apart, but there is a little more
Division.
connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
people like to say sometimes that the Mennonites kind of like have their own area, like their own country in
Yeah.
Belize. Too,
Well,
as
that's true.
With Spanish Chacao.
Let's,
Yeah.
let's talk about Bengi,
Yeah.
Lady Kathy.
Bengi.
Yeah, he's a special character.
Very
He's
special.
central in this story. So and he was also, if correct me, is you knew
He's
him.
based on my late brother-in-law, my husband's brother, and Billy. And he was diagnosed schizophrenic, and we were his caregivers. And he was our entry into another life. But he never got involved in these adventures. But his character, the things he says, and he was in Seaview as a younger person, and he did write an amazing journal about, and so some of the description of being in Seaview comes from his journal. And he was a very special person, very annoying some of the time, but a very special person. So the idea is to try and understand that there's humanity and there's something worthy of respect in everybody.
Definitely.
Psychoses are very hard because the experience is so different, and it's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes if you haven't heard voices telling you to do things, and most of us haven't.
Yeah.
It's very hard, so I can't say you can really get inside someone, but that's what it makes it so different. Things like depression, you might not have been clinically depressed, but sometimes you felt depressed.
associate
so
with it, right?
there's some kind of understanding, but the psychoses are other.
Yeah, and also like the setting of the book, the time it was written, like they were still exploring mental health. Like this was like they were experimenting with his treatment, which worked out well for him, right?
Yeah.
But I'm thinking if we look in the present and going.
There's a lot more options, especially if you're diagnosed. Well, the psychotic illnesses tend to show up in late teenage, early 20s. sometimes drug use does exacerbate it, but I don't think it causes it, but it can exacerbate it. But the treatments now, because even in the so-called first world, the psychotic drugs weren't available till the late 1960s, early 70s. And I mean, the treatments people were getting were horrific, but they didn't know what else to do. But the kinds of medications available now can allow people to live a better quality of life.
Yeah, like reflecting on that. So I was reading a reflection from Christy Almeida from Autism Belize that she wrote on Bengi, and then she writes, "And I can't help but wonder that if we as a society knew more, then could Bengi have been more?" And that was like, it really stuck out for me because, like the more we know about mental health, about treatment, then I'm sure probably Benji could have experienced a better life than what.
Right, but as you say, it's set at an earlier time when it really wasn't available.
Right. And then the family, they managed fairly well with the situation, right? I mean, the brothers came from the US and I feel like they were ready to wash their hands from the situation. At least that was like
It's
the initial
hard.
feeling.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard on everyone. And actually, you'll know if you talk to parents of children who have special needs, either physical or mental, their greatest fear is, what will happen when I die? Who will look after this child?
Right.
And so it's a real, real fear that people have. And brothers and sisters, cousins, they step in, but it's not easy.
And it's not the same care as you get from your parents.
There's
It's
yeah,
not
the
the
love from your
same,
parents.
and it's not easy.
And even you mentioned, I know you jokingly said that like at times Billy was annoying, but it's just like the understanding the personality is hard for some people.
Yeah.
And some people just don't have it in them to deal with that personality every single day. And that's what caretaking has to do. Like, you have to be dealing with that different personality every single day.
Well, you'll see in the book, Benji lives in a little separate room. Now, which is what we had, because he could come in and watch TV, but he couldn't smoke in my house. So after a while, he wanted to smoke, so he'd go
Right.
outside.
So you have to go outside.
But his little house was right beside ours. But how many families have the resources to do that? I mean, you might already be living 10 in a house. And so I think a lot of times people blame families. Well, why don't you let them do that now? But it's a tremendous strain. And if you're already under strain, it's just too much. So resources is a lot of the issue.
Yeah. Also like another character that sticks out for me, I think his name is Junior.
Yes.
So, and what sticks out for me from this is that, so Junior, like his grandmother was from Gales Point. And then at some point he does...
City River.
City River, yes, thank you.
Same thing.
Same, it's right there, right? So, but he does this reflection where he says, if I had grown up with my grandmother, then my situation would have been different.
Yeah.
And, and we always... as you rightly say, we're always as third-party observers, we're easy to judge people and for the actions that they had, because he was the guy that murdered
he did terrible things. There's no excuse for that. But he didn't really want to be that person.
Yeah.
So I'm not making excuses,
Right.
but it's not that someone wakes up one day and says, I think I want to be Dr. Evil. No,
Yeah.
It
But
doesn't work like that. But
things happen, but he really didn't want to be that person.
And I think
Yeah.
a lot of people can reflect
Yeah.
and relate to that too as well, because like you mentioned, Kev, there's that wanting to grow up in a different environment, to grow up with someone else that they
And you
think
can see the
have
impact
it
of your
better.
environment has...
Yes, your
Yeah.
impact, the support you receive, all
Yeah.
these different things really make or break the character that you grow into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, people are often circumstances of their situations. Like they're subjected to that.
Yeah, and you can see how Junior wanted to do different with his son that he was expecting, right?
Yeah.
He was like, I want this child to grow up in a different space, with a different mentality, something that I did not have. And I feel like that really sticks out for a lot of young men, for a lot of young parents out, or even parents in general, I'm thinking, I'm not a parent, so, but
It's hard. I always tell women who are pregnant, having the baby is the easy part. Bringing them up is
I could
the hard part,
imagine.
Yeah.
because it never ends.
yes.
I could
Yeah.
imagine.
And like I told you, my favorite character was George.
I wonder why, Kevin.
Right.
Can you tell the people why George
No,
is your favorite
I like
character?
George because, like, as I shared, he was holding a lot to himself, and he was afraid of getting judged or not being able to connect with his regular folks that he was seeing. And then he met the lawyer who was working on Benji's case, and they had such a great connection. I mean, he was cheating on his wife, but I mean, it was
Well, most of the time he was cheating intellectually,
Right.
not physically.
Uh-huh.
And that's
And
the
he had a
other
guilt
thing.
about
Is
it,
that
right?
infidelity? Because he he was enjoying his intellectual life with Sandra.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point early on, he does reflect about whether that's really infidelity. He wasn't
right.
physically involved.
Yeah, yeah.
But he certainly felt more connection.
And I love how George's story developed throughout the story, because at the beginning, like, he was really not so keen about Benji, and they had their clashes, but then eventually, like, he really, like, took hold and care of Benji and
Yeah.
everything. And so that was like where I was trying to figure out, how does George tie into all this story, But you put it so beautifully out there, and I was like, wow, now I see, like, the impact of
That's
George
connected and
here.
everything.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's the thing when you're reading, you're reading and you see this one side and you're like, how does it unfold? You make all your inferences and say, okay, this is gonna, but then you see it unfold for you. And I
Well,
think
that's why Benji, it's not really a story about Benji as such, but he is the character around whom everyone else rotates. So he is a central character. So I tell people it's not about mental illness, but because Benji is the character that draws everyone together. Well, I kind of get on my soapbox a bit about stigma, discrimination, and understanding, and that everybody deserves some kind of quality of life.
But especially back in the day, that it's 10 times harder, like we mentioned before, that stigma and discrimination, people didn't
It's
know.
pretty bad still.
No, it's pretty bad
Yeah.
still, but if you really compare back then to now, I feel like there's just more conversations happening before.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course,
Absolutely.
resources like we mentioned before. So it's bad. I feel like there's so much work to be done, but as compared to like the life that Benji has as compared to now,
Yeah.
it would have been different. It definitely would have been different.
Well, I should say, I'll put in a plug.
Yes, please.
Any profits, which you might know, writing, you don't even reach the minimum wage with writing. It's just something you do.
Right.
But there is a small $2 or $3 profit per book. And that goes to the Welcome Resource Center in Belize City. And that's a day center for homeless and mentally ill people. And it provides social support because we do provide a lot of medical support. I mean, there's more things needed and there's better infrastructure, but we do pretty well on community mental health, given our resources. But you need more than pills. You need, and a lot of homeless and mentally ill people that might be the same people, they don't have any social support. And so people can go to the center, get a breakfast, midday meal, hygiene facilities, clean clothes, leisure. So if you buy the book, you are also in a small way. But if you want to support the center bigger than that,
Go directly
please go
there.
ahead.
Yes, because I love the center, and I remember I went to one of the functions that you guys were celebrating. I don't remember how much years that was before COVID. So
Yeah.
but the only thing I remember wanting more from the center was to have maybe a place to stay for them. But I know you guys don't provide that service
No.
for them, but it's an incredible center. Like, you see people come in, they appreciate, they have their breakfast, they're just like socializing and everything, and they know them by name and everything
Of
too
course.
as well. So definitely, guys, go out and support the center. Even if it's materials, if you can't give money, if you
Yeah.
could give like food, pantry items or stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Clothes, you know, you have a lot of clothes in your
especially men's clothes.
Yes.
Because we have far more male participants than female.
Okay.
And yeah, money, food. We recycle Boyne bottles. So not to keep the center going, but the participants help to sort them and they earn a little something.
It's some therapy too.
We have a little laundrette, so you could go and do your clothes and pay to get them washed and dried. And the participant that helps you do that, they earn, so they get a little something. We don't pay cleaners. Different participants take their turns and they earn something.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're mentioning that because even though they have a mental illness, they're still able to do things.
Some.
You're right?
It depends. There are different
Depends on
levels.
the condition. Yeah.
We've
Okay.
actually had a lot of deportees because, you know, people get deported. They've lived all their lives in the States since they were 1 or 2. They have no family left in Belize. So those tend to be short term. Like we help to get them on their feet and maybe connect them with some employment. And
Okay.
so we have a range of
Okay.
people.
All
Sorry, I got off the topic. But
No.
No,
please
Yes.
go ahead and
Yeah.
support.
Support
Definitely.
Bengi. It's a very, very, very good read. I mean, it's an easy read.
Yeah.
It's catchy.
It's not only
It's-
about mental illness for
It's
people
full of
that
twists.
are thinking.
It's full of twists, which I absolutely loved. And you also get to support the center,
You
which
get the drama,
Yeah.
and I love it.
I love it. I love the drama. I was like,
Thank
"Ah."
you.
Yes, George. I'm going to start
George.
calling him George. Moving forward, he's going to be George.
Yeah.
I just want you to know a viewer said it's still cheating here. So even if
Yeah.
it's intellectual cheating, it's still cheating.
Yeah.
And I agree
And-
with you.
And he struggles with that.
He does. Yeah.
Because
But I'm glad that he had the guilt too as well, because some people will look at that and they're like, it's not really cheating because it's not physical or so. But it's good that he had that consciousness too.
and
as
of
well.
course we know it never goes on in Belize.
It doesn't happen.
Never at
Never.
all.
It doesn't happen.
Never.
Of course, not in Belize. But Lady
Yeah.
Kathy, we just want to thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much.
being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for creating this book. We could tell the time, the effort, everything that came into making it so amazing for people out there that have heard this whole conversation and still don't know yet if they should buy. Please go out and buy, not only because of the profits, but it's just a great read to be able to connect to Belize in a later time.
You can picture yourself walking
Yeah, you
down
could
the
picture
street.
yourself. You could picture the China shop, everything.
That's one thing about Belizean books. You can see yourself there. You can immerse yourself so well into this
And then
setting.
hearing the names, you know, villages, all these different things, like it makes you like
I
Gales
was there,
Point,
you know?
not Gales Point,
City River.
City River.
all these things like you're like, hey, that's in Belize. There's a sense of ownership that you kind of take on when you read the book, knowing that it's in a Belizean context too as well.
Yeah.
So please make sure you guys go out and purchase the book. If you're not a physical book person, you can buy it on Amazon, and you could hook up your Kindle and everything.
Or your phone.
Or your
but that's
phone.
a bit small. But
People
people
make it
do
work.
read. I know people don't read much. I grew up reading. So if anybody wants to make it into a movie, you're welcome to. We'll work it out. But that
Definitely.
I can't do. That's a whole nother.
Another thing.
They could do a shorter version,
Yeah.
like a shorter condensed.
Yeah, but setting it up is a whole different
I hear
thing.
you.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a lot. That's
Yeah.
a lot.
Thank
But
you. Thank you.
so
It was
much
an
for
enjoyable
being here.
conversation.
You're welcome.
And so with that, guys, we go to our next commercial break, and we'll be right back.